I just wanted to restore my grandfather's Mustang quietly in my own garage. But our HOA president had other plans that led to surveillance, sabotage, and eventually handcuffs. What she did behind my back was illegal, and I had the video to prove it. If you've ever dealt with HOA nightmares, this story will hit home. Stick around to hear how one man turned the tables and brought down a tyrant. Like the video, subscribe for more real revenge stories, and don't miss the explosive ending. I never expected to find myself in the crosshairs of our neighborhood's HOA president, but that's exactly what happened. My name is Daniel, and for 3 years I lived quietly in Oakwood Estates, a suburban pocket of perfection, with neat hedges, matching mailboxes, and barbecues every 4th of July. On paper, it was a dream community. The only blemish on that picture-perfect image? Margaret Holloway. To her face, she was Mrs. Holloway, president of the Homeowners Association. But behind closed doors, residents called her what she really was, a full-blown Karen. From the first day I moved in, she made it crystal clear that she ran the place with military precision. Dressed always in pastels, driving a spotless white Lexus, and clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon, Margaret took joy, actual joy, in enforcing every obscure rule in the HOA bylaws. Grass half an inch too high. Violation. Trash can visible an hour past pickup? Violation. A lawn gnome that didn't match the approved aesthetic list? Triple violation. But I was careful. I kept my place immaculate, nodded politely through her lectures at community meetings, and minded my business. And it worked, until I decided to restore my late grandfather's 1967 Mustang. I'd inherited the car after his passing, and it meant something to me. At that month's HOA meeting, I mentioned the project. Margaret's eyes narrowed the second I said the word Mustang. Absolutely not, she replied, her voice tight as she flipped open her 3-ring binder. Vehicle repairs are prohibited in all visible areas of the property. Section 8, paragraph 12. She tapped her manicured fingernail on the page for emphasis.
I'm aware, I answered calmly.
That's why I'll be working inside my garage, with the door shut. There's nothing in the bylaws against that. Her smugness wavered. Just for a second. Then came the smile, the one that told me I'd just made her list. We'll see about that, she said, and immediately moved on to deny someone's koi pond request. I thought I was in the clear. I wasn't. That weekend, I began restoring the Mustang. I was meticulous. Garage door down, ventilation installed, zero noise spilling out. I was doing everything by the book. But around noon, I heard a knock on the garage side door. Expecting my neighbor Dave, who was curious about the project, I opened it without thinking. Standing there, arms crossed, was Margaret Holloway. Her lipstick perfect, her sunglasses perched on her head, and an expression like she'd caught me burying a body. I knew it, she snapped, trying to peer past me. You're working on that car, I can smell chemicals from my patio. I blocked the doorway. Margaret, I'm not violating any rules. The work is inside, silent, and contained. You can't just show up in my backyard. That's trespassing. Her face went crimson. As HOA president, I have the right to inspect for violations. Step aside. Actually, you don't, I said, keeping my voice steady. Inspections require 24-hour notice. You're not allowed to barge in uninvited. She tried to push past me. I shut the door in her face. Through the glass, I heard her hiss, "This isn't over, Daniel." And I believed her. The next morning, the retaliation began. At first, it was almost amusing. A letter in my mailbox accused me of improper storage of hazardous materials. The next day, another one claimed a noise violation, despite the fact that I hadn't even started the engine. Then came the most absurd, unauthorized structural modifications. Apparently, Margaret had decided that the small exhaust vent I'd installed in the garage, entirely within code, was now a threat to the harmony of the neighborhood. Each notice came with a fine, and each fine increased in value. But I wasn't intimidated. I knew the rules. I responded to every citation with photographic evidence, scanned copies of the bylaws, and calm, bulletproof rebuttals. I practically memorized the HOA rulebook at that point. But Margaret wasn't after justice. She was after submission. Soon, my neighbors began warning me. She was talking about me at her wine nights, claiming I was running an illegal chop shop. One guy told me she'd shown him evidence on her phone, photos taken at odd angles and zoomed-in shots of tools through my garage window. Things started to feel less like an HOA dispute and more like a vendetta. Still, I thought she'd eventually move on. Margaret always needed someone to target, someone to remind the rest of the neighborhood who was in charge. I figured once she realized I wouldn't budge, she'd shift focus. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I went to visit my parents for the weekend. I left early Saturday, scheduled the lawn crew, and locked up as usual. Everything was in place to ensure no rule was broken. When I returned Sunday evening, I noticed nothing unusual, until I opened my garage. Something was off. Tools slightly out of place. A faint chemical smell that didn't match what I'd left behind. My stomach twisted as I reviewed my security footage. There she was. Margaret Holloway. Caught in perfect HD by the side camera. At around 3 p.m. on Saturday, she approached the side door of my garage. She tried the handle. Locked. She looked around, disappeared from view, and returned 20 minutes later with what looked like a Slim Jim or lockpick. It took her 3 tries, but eventually, she forced the door open. She slipped inside like some budget Bond villain and spent the next 45 minutes going through my garage. She opened drawers, took photos of my restoration work, and worst of all, scratched the fresh paint I'd spent days perfecting. Not an accident. A deliberate, visible, mocking scrape down the driver's side. My hands shook as I paused the video. This wasn't HOA business anymore. This was a crime. Monday morning, I walked into the county sheriff's office with a USB stick and a folder of documents. Deputy Williams watched the video with narrowed eyes. "Well, that's about as clear-cut as it gets," he muttered. "Breaking and entering. Trespassing. Vandalism. You want to press charges?" "Absolutely," I replied. "She thinks she's untouchable." I gave my statement, handed over copies of previous citations, and highlighted Margaret's escalating behavior. The deputy nodded as he read. "We'll take it from here," he said. I left feeling a strange mix of dread and relief. I didn't know how long it would take, or whether anything would happen at all. But I knew one thing for sure: Margaret Holloway had finally crossed the line. I didn't have to wait long. That same afternoon, around 2 o'clock, I was working remotely from my living room when I heard the unmistakable rise and fall of an argument coming from somewhere down the street. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just another neighborly disagreement over a hedge or parking space. But the tone, sharp, high-pitched, indignant, caught my attention. I stepped outside. A small crowd had begun to gather discreetly, peeking from behind curtains and pretending to check mailboxes. All eyes were fixed on Margaret Holloway's driveway. And there, standing beside her pristine Lexus, were 2 uniformed deputies. One of them was Deputy Williams. Margaret was mid-rant, gesturing wildly, face flushed with fury, her voice slicing through the afternoon air. "This is a mistake," she shouted. "Do you even know who I am? I am the president of this homeowners association." Her words rang out like a battle cry, defiant and shrill. "That gives me the right to inspect any property in this community. I was performing my duties." Williams stayed calm. "Ma'am, being HOA president does not give you the legal right to force entry into a locked garage," he said evenly. "You're being charged with breaking and entering, criminal trespassing, and vandalism." "Vandalism," she repeated, her voice rising. "I was documenting violations." "The security footage shows you deliberately scratching the vehicle's paint," he replied without blinking. "Please place your hands behind your back." The moment those words left his mouth, the neighborhood went completely silent. Margaret's face contorted with disbelief. "You can't be serious," she said, backing away slightly. "I'm the one trying to protect this community." But the second deputy had already approached. They moved in with quiet efficiency, ignoring her continued protests. And just like that, Margaret Holloway, the self-appointed queen of Oakwood Estates, was handcuffed and escorted to the waiting cruiser. Still ranting. Still denying. But this time, no one was listening. No one stepped forward to defend her. In fact, for the first time in years, I saw something else on my neighbors' faces: relief. After the cruiser drove away, a few people cautiously approached me. First was Dave, from 2 doors down. He clapped me on the back. You did what the rest of us were too scared to do, he said quietly. Others followed, sharing their own stories of harassment. Fines for invisible fence height discrepancies. Warnings for unauthorized Halloween decorations. Threats over non-regulation mailbox flags. It had all been building for years. And now, finally, the dam had burst. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived from the HOA board. It informed me that, in light of recent events, an emergency meeting had been held. The result? A unanimous vote to remove Margaret Holloway from her position as president, effective immediately. The board also rescinded every fine and citation issued against me and formally apologized for the unfortunate and inappropriate circumstances I had endured. I pinned the letter to my fridge like a trophy. But the fallout wasn't over. Not for Margaret. The local paper ran a small story, nothing sensational, just a crisp little piece buried beneath city council notes and sports scores. But the headline said it all: HOA president arrested for breaking into resident's garage. It was enough to make waves. Enough to ruin a reputation. Especially when that reputation was her livelihood. Margaret Holloway's downfall didn't end with the arrest. As soon as the story made its quiet appearance in the local newspaper, the ripple effect began. Her picture-perfect image, so carefully cultivated over years of neighborhood micromanagement, started to crack. Margaret wasn't just an HOA president. She was a real estate agent whose entire business relied on a reputation for order, discipline, and authority. Within days, her broker suspended her license pending the outcome of her criminal case. Rumors spread fast.
Clients vanished.
Listings were pulled. No one wanted their home associated with scandal, and certainly not with a woman accused of vandalizing someone's private property. Her real estate signs, once a common sight around Oakwood Estates, disappeared overnight. I kept a low profile. I didn't need to gloat. The neighborhood spoke for itself. Some residents still looked stunned, others vindicated. A few even confessed to me that they had once considered filing complaints, but had been too intimidated to follow through. She had us all scared, one elderly neighbor said. It's like we forgot this wasn't a dictatorship. The following week, Margaret appeared in court for her arraignment. I didn't plan to go, but something pulled me there. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe closure. I sat quietly in the back row, dressed plainly, unnoticed by most. Margaret entered the courtroom looking nothing like the polished woman who once barked at me about lawn heights and decorative gnomes. Her hair was unkempt, makeup minimal, and the confident stride she was known for had vanished. She looked smaller, diminished. As the judge listed the charges, breaking and entering, criminal trespass, vandalism, Margaret stood rigid, her hands gripping the defense table. When he announced the bail amount, $5,000, and stated she could face up to a year in jail if convicted, I saw the color drain from her face. She turned, scanning the courtroom. Her eyes landed on me. For a second, I thought she might look away. Instead, her face twisted with rage. She pointed a trembling finger directly at me. "This is your fault," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You and that damn car, you've ruined everything." Her attorney tried to hush her, but she wasn't done. "I was protecting this neighborhood. That garage was an eyesore. You let someone like him destroy the order we worked so hard to build." Gasps echoed through the room. The judge banged his gavel. "That's enough, Mrs. Holloway. One more outburst and I will hold you in contempt." Margaret fell silent, but her eyes never left mine. They burned, not with guilt, but with the cold fury of someone who had lost their throne and blamed everyone but themselves. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile either. I just watched her, the same way she used to watch us from behind her sunglasses and HOA clipboard, looking for something to punish. Only now, the roles had reversed. And it felt just. When the judge called for recess, I left quietly. Outside, the sun felt warmer, brighter. For the first time in months, I could breathe without looking over my shoulder for a violation notice taped to my door. Margaret's reign was over, and Oakwood Estates felt like a neighborhood again, not a battlefield. In the weeks that followed, life in Oakwood Estates settled into something unfamiliar: peace. Without Margaret's constant surveillance and threats, the neighborhood began to breathe. The board held a new election, this time with community input, and selected a soft-spoken retired schoolteacher named Linda Foster as interim president. Her first order of business? A listening session, where residents could voice concerns without fear of being steamrolled. For the first time in years, people showed up willingly. I stayed out of the spotlight. I hadn't sought revenge, only fairness. But that didn't stop neighbors from leaving thank you notes in my mailbox or waving a little longer when I passed by. Some even dropped by with snacks and warm words, small unexpected gestures of solidarity. One morning, I opened my front door to find a note tucked under the mat. It read simply, "Thank you for standing up when the rest of us couldn't."
No signature.
I didn't need one. The Mustang project continued. The scratches Margaret left behind were deep, but not beyond repair. And every time I polished the new paint or adjusted a valve, I felt something lift, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. The car had started as a tribute to my grandfather. Now it was something more, a symbol of standing your ground. As for Margaret, she vanished from the neighborhood. Her house was put on the market discreetly through a different agency. No for sale sign. No open house. Just an empty driveway and drawn curtains. Some said she moved to a nearby town, others whispered she'd gone back to live with family. No one knew for sure, and no one asked. The silence she left behind was a welcome one. At her final court hearing, I didn't attend. I didn't need to. Deputy Williams sent me an email afterward, guilty plea on misdemeanor charges, community service, and restitution for the damage to my garage. It wasn't jail time, but it was justice all the same. Her real estate license remained suspended. Her name, once spoken with fear, became a cautionary tale. People stopped using Margaret, and returned to calling her what she was, a bitter reminder of unchecked authority. Oakwood Estates slowly changed, too. More flags went up, more Halloween decorations, more laughter in the evenings. The fences stayed the same height, the lawns still manicured, but the energy was lighter. More human. I often thought about how something as simple as restoring a car had set all this in motion. It could have been avoided. It should have been simple. But maybe it needed to happen. Maybe someone like Margaret had to be confronted for others to feel free. One evening, just after finishing a test run of the Mustang, I stood in my driveway, engine humming like a memory brought back to life. Across the street, a kid on a bike stopped and stared wide-eyed. "Cool car, mister," he said. I smiled. "Thanks. Took some work." He nodded and rode off. I watched him go, the sun dipping low behind the rooftops of a neighborhood that finally felt like home. Peace isn't always quiet. Sometimes, it comes with noise, conflict, and a fight you didn't ask for. But when it's over, when the dust settles and the tyrant is gone, you realize something. You were never just defending your property. You were defending the right to live freely, without fear. And that's worth every scraped knuckle and every battle scar. Have you ever had a power-hungry HOA nightmare? Tell us your story in the comments. We might feature it in a future video. And don't forget to check out our next story where a birthday party turned into a police standoff thanks to, you guessed it, another HOA president gone rogue.